Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Space travel, it's got this incredible hold on all of us, right? This urge to explore what's beyond our planet. And lately, well, your searches have been lighting up about the return of these NASA astronauts, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore.
Oh yeah, it's been quite a buzz.
Yeah, it has. And we've got this whole collection of your search terms, like a snapshot of what you were, really into as their mission unfolded.
Absolutely. It gives us a real-time look into what aspects of space travel are just grabbing people's attention. It's a fantastic guide for what we can talk about today.
I agree. And using those searches as our guide, we're going to deep dive into a few key areas. First, like what were Sudi and Butch doing on the ISS, the International Space Station, to begin with.
Right.
Then, well, there were a ton of searches about whether they were, stuck up there longer than planned. So delays, definitely a hot topic.
For sure.
How do they actually get back home? And where did they finally land? So much to uncover. Let's start with their mission to the ISS.
Okay, yeah, a perfect place to begin. And your searches really highlight that, with all the terms like International Space Station, NASA astronauts, Crew-9, that sort of thing, it all points right back to their mission. And Sunita Williams, or often, she goes by Suni Williams, and Butch Wilmore, they were both part of NASA's Crew-9, the specific team of astronauts, right, assigned to a rotation on the International Space Station, the ISS.
Oh.
And you're right about that interest in how long they spent up there. All those searches like, why were the astronauts stuck in space, or how long were the astronauts stuck in space? It tells us that the length of their stay and any changes to it really caught people's attention.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, what was the original plan? How did things actually play out? And we even saw searches asking, how long were the astronauts supposed to be in space? Which it kind of suggests that maybe they ended up staying longer than initially planned. So it'll be interesting to, dig into the sources and see if they give us any details about those original timelines and how they might have shifted, if at all.
Right, exactly. And when we think about their trip back home, the way they returned, that's another big thing people were searching for. I mean, the terms are filled with, phrases like NASA astronauts return, SpaceX Dragon, Dragon capsule, Dragon Freedom, all those terms. And it really puts the spotlight on SpaceX and their Dragon spacecraft, the crucial role they played in bringing Suni and Butch back to Earth.
They were definitely front and center.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And to answer those questions directly, the ones like, did the astronauts make it home? Are the astronauts back yet? Have the astronauts returned to Earth? All those. Well, the frequent use of the term splashdown today, which, based on these searches, we know refers to Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, it confirms they did. They made it back safely.
That's always good to hear. And the landing itself, wow, that seemed to be like a massive point of interest for so many of you out there. We saw tons of searches for where did the astronauts land today, and just where did the astronauts land?
Like people were glued to their screens.
It really does seem that way. Like people were tracking their every move until the moment they touched back down on our planet.
Absolutely. I mean, the sheer number of searches for things like splashdown time today. What time is splashdown today? When is splashdown today? What time are the astronauts landing today? It's remarkable. It really underlines how closely everyone was following this final stage of their mission.
Like a nail biter, almost.
Yeah, it really is. It's fascinating how these real-time details, all these specifics about space travel can grab so much attention from the public. And of course, the mentions of NASA livestream and SpaceX livestream, those really show us how people were actively tuning in, watching the whole thing unfold.
It's like a modern day adventure happening right before our eyes,
Yeah.
Now let's dig a bit deeper into SpaceX, their involvement in all this. Your searches, they definitely put SpaceX front and center. We saw SpaceX Rescue, SpaceX NASA astronauts, even Elon Musk's SpaceX NASA, and just a whole bunch of SpaceX launch landing related searches. They've become a major player in these NASA missions, haven't they? So what makes their role so important, at this point in space exploration? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a really key question. And all those repeating mentions, they really emphasize this ongoing shift, this movement toward commercial spaceflight. And of course, this increasingly strong partnership, this collaboration between NASA and private companies, companies like SpaceX. It's not just about, providing transportation. It's a fundamental change in how we approach space travel.
Yeah.
potentially leading to, greater efficiency, more innovation. And we also see your interest in the initial launch phase, all those searches for NASA's SpaceX rocket launch, SpaceX launch today, rocket launch today, space launch today, all of that. Plus the specific mention of Falcon 9, well, that identifies the type of rocket typically used for these Dragon missions.
Right, the Falcon 9, like they're reliable workhorse,
Yeah.
And we also saw Crew-9 mentioned a lot, which, that directly refers to Suni and Butch's mission, and even Crew-10, which kind of hints at the next team heading up to the ISS. It gives you this sense of the continuous flow, right, of astronauts going back and forth to the station. So the crew designation, it really signifies, a specific team on a particular rotation.
Exactly. So Crew-9, that was this specific team, conducting their work on the International Space Station for a certain period, and Crew-10 will be the next group, the ones taking over. It's kind of like a continuous scientific expedition, with rotating personnel.
Right, like shifts almost.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, looking at some of the broader context that came up in your searches, Boeing Starliner, that one that caught my attention. Given SpaceX's involvement, what does this parallel development of Boeing's Starliner tell us about NASA's overall strategy, for human spaceflight? What do you think?
Yeah, the mention of Boeing Starliners is definitely significant. It represents NASA's their deliberate strategy of having multiple commercial partners, right, for human spaceflight under their commercial crew program. This approach, well, it ensures redundancy. So, if one system, let's say, faces delays or issues, there's a backup, there's another option available. It also, well, it fosters competition, which can drive innovation and potentially, bring down costs in the long run.
Yeah, like a friendly rivalry, pushing everyone forward.
Right, exactly.
That's a smart way to approach it, not relying on just one provider. We also saw astronaut salary pop up in the searches, which that's a classic question. Everyone wants to know. While we might not have the specifics for Suni and Butch, what can you tell us, generally speaking, about the factors that influence astronaut compensation? Like what goes into determining their salary?
Oh yeah, it's a super common question, and generally astronaut salaries, well, they're structured based on government pay scales, and they depend on factors like experience, education, rank, that sort of thing. It reflects the high level of expertise, the extensive training, and of course the inherent risks that come with space travel.
It's definitely not your average 9 to 5.
No, not at all.
Now, going back to the real-time aspect of their return, we saw searches for live splashdown coverage and live astronaut return, which, again, it just highlights that public interest, right, in witnessing these moments as they happen.
Yeah.
Plus, Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral, those were mentioned, which, those are those iconic locations, the ones we often associate with spaceflight. And while the splashdown happens at sea for Dragon, these places are key operational hubs, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Kennedy Space Center in Florida, well, it's a primary launch site for many NASA missions, and the adjacent Cape Canaveral Space Force Station also hosts numerous launches. And while the Dragon spacecraft does splash down in the ocean, these locations, they're crucial for preparation, launch, and just overall mission control. And the terms Dragon splashdown and SpaceX splashdown, those really solidify the specific type of spacecraft, right, and landing method used.
Right, it paints a clear picture.
Exactly.
We also noticed some searches related to delays, searches like SpaceX launch scrubbed and SpaceX NASA astronauts launch delay. And this brings us back to our earlier point, about whether Suni and Butch's return was actually on schedule. These searches, well, they suggest that launch delays, they're a fairly common part of spaceflight, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. Spaceflight, it's an incredibly complex undertaking, and safety, well, that's always the top priority. So delays because of technical issues, weather conditions, or other unexpected factors, those are not uncommon in both the launch and return phases of a mission. So it's quite possible that the initial Crew-9 launch, it experienced some adjustments to the schedule, and those kinds of delays, well, they can sometimes have a knock-on effect on the planned duration of a mission, the time spent in space. It's fascinating to think about all the variables at play.
It really is. Now, we also saw a couple of names pop up that might not have an immediate connection to this mission. Homer Hickam and Alexander Gorbanov.
Do you have any insights into why those names might have, appeared in the same search queries as the astronauts' return? It's a little curious.
Hmm. That's an interesting observation. Without more specific context, it's tough to say for sure, but we can consider some possibilities. Homer Hickam, well, he's famous for his memoir Rocket Boys, the book that inspired the movie October Sky. And his name, well, it often comes up in discussions about, the inspiration, the human stories behind rocketry, and space exploration in general. So perhaps, your fellow listeners, they were making a connection to the personal journeys of astronauts, thinking about the individuals behind these missions.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Alexander Gerbanov, well, he's a bit less immediately clear, in this context. He could be a figure from the history of space exploration, or maybe a scientist involved in related research, or even, someone in current news related to space. It's hard to say without more information. But it really highlights how a single search, it can open up all these avenues, to a whole range of related information.
Yeah, it's like a rabbit hole almost.
It really is.
You start with one question and end up exploring all these fascinating tangents.
Exactly.
We also noticed some more general questions about space travel, things like how big is the International Space Station and how long does it take to get to the International Space Station? These, well, they indicate a broader curiosity, don't they, about the fundamental aspects of human spaceflight and the environment, where Suni and Butch were living and working.
Yeah, absolutely. Those questions, they reflect a basic interest in understanding the scale, the practicalities of living and working in space. It reminds us that while, these missions are becoming more routine, they still represent an extraordinary, human achievement.
They really do.
Pushing the boundaries.
Okay, so to wrap up our deep dive into your search queries, it's clear that you were all really following the return of Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore.
Yeah.
Your questions touched on their mission to the International Space Station, the understandable interest in whether there were any delays, which is, as we said, a pretty common factor in spaceflight, and a significant focus on their safe return, aboard the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, culminating in that ocean splashdown.
Right.
And the level of interest in live coverage, well, that really highlights just how captivating these events are, for so many people.
Exactly. Your searches, they provide this compelling snapshot, of what captures the public's imagination, when it comes to human spaceflight. It's this blend of scientific endeavor, technological innovation, and the very human element, right, of exploration and risk.
It's a powerful combination.
It really is.
Yeah.
So for you, the listener, as you reflect on this deep dive, think about the increasing role that private companies like SpaceX are playing in facilitating human space travel. What implications might this have for the future of space exploration in terms of accessibility, innovation, and the types of missions we might see? Maybe delve a little further into the specifics of the Crew-9 mission, or explore more about the ongoing commercialization of low Earth orbit. It's a vast and ever evolving field with so many fascinating avenues to explore. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.